Okay, what I'd like to do now is show you a demonstration or a simulation of using a computerized system to keep track of release of information request and what information has been released from each patient's record. We're going to use, you will hear me refer to it as SoftMed. The name has changed now to a 3M system, but it's the same system that we've used in other applications such as analysis of records. We use this to check out charts, to check charts in, so for a chart location system. And we're going to use a particular module called chart release, and we're going to release information off a patient's record. And I have a record on John David Smith. Well, first I have a release of information request and an authorization that has been completed by John David Smith, and I've given you an example of this, a handout along in this lab with all the other information, and I want you to print that out or at least view it, but keep it for future reference because this release of information authorization has all of those components that are required by HIPAA to be on an authorization for release of information. And so this request, again, is for John David Smith, and the request is to release his records to Regional Medical Center for continuing care. And so I've received this request, and the first thing that I would do is make sure that the authorization is valid, that all the components are filled in, that everything is present that has to be there and is required by HIPAA. And so the first thing I'll do is go to the Master Patient Index and determine John David Smith's medical record number so that I can look up his record. And when I've done that, I've determined that John David Smith's medical record number is 740889. And I usually document that on the actual authorization. And so when I pull the record, whether it's in paper form or electronic form, then there should be in that record somewhere an example of John David Smith's signature. And so that's one thing I want to do. I want to compare signatures to make sure that this is John David Smith's signature and that he has signed this release of information authorization. And then I'll check everything, and I have checked this, and it is a valid authorization. And so as I fill this request, I'm going to enter it into this electronic chart release system. The way I do that is the first thing I'm going to do is add, meaning I'm going to add this record into the system. And I said that John David Smith's medical record number is 740889. Type in his name, Smith, John David, and I'm going to add a new request on this patient. And so as with other applications that we've used in this particular suite, the software suite, is there are certain things that are mandatory that we have to put in. Other things, it just depends on the facility. So I've put in his medical record number and his name, and I can put in his type, inpatient, and I'm going to put in information regarding the dates of the records that I'm sending. Sometimes patients will have multiple admissions or discharges. I'm dealing with his 07-23, let's see, 2013 discharge. Now John David Smith's date of birth, and I can put that. I don't have to put all of this because usually all of this information is already in our system. We've put it in previously, usually on admission, And notice I'm down to the place that says requester. Well, the particular facility that's requesting information on John David Smith is Regional Medical Center. And with everything else in this SoftMed or 3M system, we usually don't type out the name, whether it's of a healthcare provider or a requester of records. We have a code number for every particular possibility. So I happen to know that the code number for Regional Medical Center is 0002, and then I'm going to enter, and notice when I put that code in that the name Regional Medical Center came up, and then now I'm going to do the request type. Well, Regional Medical Center is a healthcare facility, but you'll see here all the different choices. Could have been workman's compensation claim. It could have been a particular physician's office. It could be a government agency. There's disability determination. It could be a court order, subpoena, all different types of things. This happens to be a request from a healthcare facility. So I'll pick that. And I will also put in the date that my request was received. Now, I received this request on March the 30th. And you also see there's a blank here that we can actually put in. It says assigned to. If there are different people within the department whose responsibility it is to do release of information, then we can even in the system go in before the request is filled and assign this particular, we'll say, case to a particular individual. We can put in the date it's needed. Usually if it's a healthcare facility, they need it pretty quickly. If we choose to put all that in, when we process it, when we actually complete the processing, or that we're going to do it right now rather than later, we can check that it's processed and what date did we disclose the information. Now, the actual disclosure date, received the request on the 30th. So let's say that I'm filling this request on the 1st of April, and then I want to put in the individual who actually disclosed it. And so just for this purpose, my name's going to be Jane Doe RHIT from the Health Information Management Department. And notice there's information on here about an invoice. Now we have every right to bill for releasing information. And we usually would bill by the number of pages that we send. But many times, if it's a healthcare facility and it's for continuing care for the patient, we don't bill. And then other times we may have, and this is very common now, to have a release of information company that comes in and contracts with us, and they handle all these release of information requests and they bill for their service. It's not, let's just say it's not millions of dollars that would be generating in order to do this, but sometimes we will actually bill for our services, or another company will come in and do it and then bill for those services. So this system, you'll see, has different tabs, and we can actually go in and put in charges if we choose to and generate a bill that goes along with filling the request. Now usually if we get requests from attorneys or even from the court, we will actually put a bill on it. It's so much per page. But we're always going to record exactly what we sent. Now, on the release of information authorization, has to be very specific about what information is being requested and authorized to be sent. And on this request, it says that Regional Medical Center wants the face sheet, the history and physical, the discharge summary, and the consultation from that 7/15 to 7/23 admission. And so when I look at the chart and I go through the chart, I can determine exactly how many pages that is. In this case, the discharge summary is 1 page, the H&P is 2, consult is 1, and so I'll take that back. Discharge summary is 2 pages, the H&P is 2 pages, and the consult is 1, so that's a total of 5 pages. I'm going to put that in, and that would only be important if we're going to bill per page, but I'm just showing you where we would put that in. Now we must put in what we sent, and in this case it's under the Materials tab, and I'm going to record what I am sending off of this record, and I will put in face sheet. There's a code for that. When I enter it, then that's recorded, and I'm going to put the dates. The date from date to date would be the admission date through the discharge date, so the face sheet that was generated during this admission. So the admit date is 7/15, discharge 7/23, and then I can put any comments if I want to. Now I'm going to add that I'm also releasing the H&P. From those same dates. Add one more, discharge summary. Oops. And finally, I'm going to put in that I'm releasing the consultation. So one more. See, there is also a drop-down menu that if I don't know what the code is, then I can do a drop-down menu. Consultation is CO, so I pick that. And I put in, again, from this particular admission or discharge. And in this case, because we know that discharge summary, history and physical, face sheet, those are all done by the attending physician, but a consultation is done by a physician other than the attending, and in this case, the physician who did the consultation is Dr. Chandler, and so I may just put a note here, so I can put comments any type I want to here. And I could even put the exact date of that consult. Okay. So once we've done that and recorded everything that we're sending, then we will save that information into the system. A good example is that when we do this, maybe we get a call and said, well, we requested these records, could you please tell us when they were mailed or something like that. We can go into the system and see exactly who did it, when they were mailed, what was mailed, those types of things. And so that's how we would put in the information when we're actually filling a request for release of information. Now if we have the authorization, we're going to keep the authorization or a copy of the authorization, and what we'll do is write on it, and this is strictly, if we had paper records, this is how we used to always do it, is if I was filling that request for release of information, I would write on the authorization at the bottom and put H&P discharge summary face sheet consultation mailed this date, and then I would sign it. And then I would take that authorization and I would file it in the miscellaneous section in the record, and then we would have a record of what was sent and when was sent. So we can still do that just as a double check, but we do have the information recorded in the electronic system now, or the computerized system. I want to show you also in HIT 134 in the legal class, we talk about HIPAA and what the requirements of HIPAA contain. And one of the things that we're required as healthcare facilities, healthcare providers, is that you have to be able to provide the patient with an accounting of disclosure. And we've talked about that. An accounting of disclosure, just think about what it's saying. An accounting just means a listing of what we disclosed off the patient's record. So if the patient comes in and says, I want to know everything that's been released off my record, ever, forever and ever, then we should be able to give that to the patient. Now, if we're doing it electronically and we've put this information in the system, it's a matter of just generating a report, printing it out, and giving it to the patient. But back in the olden days, we would pull the record, and I said we're going to file that authorization on the chart, and we've documented on it what we released and when we released it and who released it. And so what we would do is just pull the record and go to that miscellaneous section of the chart where we file things like authorizations for release of information, and we'll go through and just look. Say, well, on this date we released this information to this facility. On this date we released this information to this individual. On this date we may have released information to someone's attorney, but we only do it if we have permission to do it. So we would have those authorizations and it would be documented on it. But since we have the computerized system, I wanted to show you how we can generate an accounting of disclosure. In this particular system, we can generate a variety of reports, and one of them is an accounting of disclosure. So I'm going to generate one on another patient other than Mr. John David Smith. This patient, we're going to say that Benjamin Johnson came to the department and said, I want to know what you've released from my medical records. And so what we can do is go and determine, number one, Benjamin Johnson's medical record number, and then we can go into the system and determine if we've released anything and exactly what we've released if we have released anything. So I determined that Benjamin Lee Johnson, or Benjamin Johnson's medical record number is 121212. So I'm going to search. So here he is. Okay, he's in the system here. And so I'm going to print a report so that I can give this to Mr. Johnson to show him exactly what we have released off of his record. So give it just a second. It's processing it now. And yes, I'm still here. We're just waiting on this to open up. I'm actually doing a print preview so that you can see this on the screen rather than going to the printer. So this is taking just a second. There we go. And so notice at the top it says Accounting of Disclosure. I have given you an example in HIT 134 of an actual accounting of disclosure and what's involved in it, but I wanted to show you here how we actually generate that accounting of disclosure. And it will show here that this report from Mr. Johnson, that from his record we can tell that on 12/21/2012 that we released to University Hospital his history and physical and discharge summary from an admission from 210 to 216. And we did that, and we know that University Hospital is a healthcare facility. And then on 3/15/2014, we released to the Carlisle Clinic his consultation by Dr. Barker, history and physical, path report, lab report, specifically urinalysis and chem panel, an op report, discharge summary, and face sheet from his 210 to 2/16/2012 admission. And so we know that we have sent his records twice. Now, some patients, this may be a very, very, very lengthy list, and other ones we may not have released any information off the record. But we could print out this report, and then we could give it to the patient. So that is an accounting of disclosure. We are required to do this. We've basically always done it. We're required by HIPAA, but before HIPAA came along, we always kept track of what we had sent and who sent it and when it was sent. We just may have done it on paper rather than on a computerized system.